and to a yoga class. Today, you have the opportunity to be exposed to topics such as COVID's impact on the economy, unique approaches to dealing with stress. I'm glad that was going to be recorded because I'm going to have that one on continuous loop. The value of sleep, research on finding meaning in life, our evolving understanding of the Civil War, and much more. As I said, this is a very unique and cool opportunity, and all of us are fortunate to be a part and to be members of the Westminster community, where we have the opportunity to be exposed to these ideas. We're all fortunate. Again, welcome to day 2 of the symposium. I'm really glad you're here. To introduce this morning's plenary speaker is my colleague, Dr. Anasur Rahman, Assistant Professor of Finance and Economics and Faculty Advisor to the Blue Blazers.
Thank you, David. Good morning. It is very nice to see you all here. It is our great pleasure to welcome Mr. Brian Wesbury as a plenary speaker this morning at the 2021 Hancock Symposium. For a number of years now, Mr. Wesbury has been a great friend and a supporter of Blue Blazers, which is a student-managed investment fund at Westminster. So at Westminster, we are deeply grateful to Mr. Wesbury for his continuous support. Thank you, Mr. Wesbury. Thank you very much. Currently, Mr. Wesbury is a chief economist at First Trust LP, First Trust Advisors LP, which is one of the leading investment products and services company in the United States with headquarters in Austin and Chicago. Born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Mr. Wesbury graduated from Rockbridge High School in Columbia, Missouri, and then went on to receive his Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from the University of Montana and his MBA from Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University. Throughout his career, Mr. Wesbury has held numerous distinguished positions. In 1995, and in 1996, he served as the chief economist for the Joint Economic Committee of the US Congress. He was a member of the Academic Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago from 1999 to 2007. In 2012, he was named a fellow of the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas, Texas. His writing appears in various magazines and newspapers, and he has authored 2 books. Mr. Wesbury also appears regularly on Fox, Bloomberg, CNBC, and BNN Canada TV. So we are very happy to have such a distinguished expert amongst us to talk about the financial and economic aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic that has dramatically changed our way of life. After living through this pandemic for more than 15 months, we are all eagerly waiting when we can go back to a normal life. And the title of Mr. Wesbury's talk is Normal or New Normal? That is the question. With a round of applause, let us welcome Mr. Wesbury to the stage to talk about this and help us look forward to a more normal life.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, I guess, everyone. And sorry about this. My computer is in the way of all the introducers' notes, so they're leaning over and trying to not push buttons on my computer. Anyway, it's great to be here this morning. Thank you, David. And the reason I am involved and have been involved, at least peripherally, with the Blue Blazers is because of Brock Ayers, who is a good friend and a good friend of our firm, First Trust. And that's been a pleasure. It's actually really unique, the opportunity that you get, that the Blue Blazers get. And so anyone, I don't know if all of you are members of the Blue Blazers, but if you get a chance to learn about investing, finance, and economics by putting your hands in the mud, do it, all right? Because that's the best way to learn. And finally, I'd like to thank President Loft. We had dinner last night. We had a wonderful time. And just so you know, I got some Westminster socks that I'm wearing this morning. So it's kind of fun to be here. What a historic place. And so I am today, I guess the title is New Normal or Normal, but I really want to talk about where we are in the economy. And the reason I want to talk about this with you today is because we are living in unprecedented times. All right. Now, a lot of us, I've written 2 books, as Answer said, and I speak all the time. I write all the time with these with economic pieces to communicate with our clients. I'm a stickler for words. I love words, but we all get a little lazy sometimes with words. And so people hear unprecedented and we go, oh, well, that means it's been a long time. But you all know what unprecedented means. It means never have we shut down the US economy for a pandemic. Never has the Federal Reserve printed $3.5 trillion in a 15-month period. Never have we spent $5 trillion over 15 months of our children's and grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's money. Never have we done these things. And so what's interesting about the economy today is that if it's unprecedented, then how can history help you? All right. And so what I want to talk about is I think there are some ways that history can help us and other ways that we just have to walk into the future not knowing. All right. And so let's start here with an announcement made by the National Bureau of Economic Research. Just those 6 words put people to sleep. But and this was about a month ago. All right. Now, the NBER is the group of economists who tell us, the world, a year after a recession started, that it started. And then they tell us a year after the recession ended, that it ended. What help are they? All right. But nonetheless, that's what they do. And they just came out about a month ago, roughly, and they said last year we had the shortest recession in US history. March and April of 2020 was a recession. And we're now in recovery. And one of the reasons I started with the word unprecedented is that, in my opinion, using normal words like recession and recovery shouldn't be done today, because we didn't have a normal recession. We have never shut down the economy before. The reason the economic activity declined is because we shut it down. We locked people up. We closed restaurants. We stopped people from flying. We stopped all baseball games, all football games, everything for 2 solid months. That is not a normal recession. See, I'm old enough to remember in the early 1980s when Paul Volcker, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, jacked interest rates up to over 20%. Remember, right now, the Fed's holding them at 0. All right, you can get a 30-year mortgage today for 2.75%. And he pushed short-term interest rates over 20%. That caused a collapse in economic activity. That was a recession caused by economic factors. This one, the one we're talking about right now, if you look at it, this is the decline in consumption last March and April, was caused by a shutdown, a lockdown of the economy. And so to call it a recession, in my opinion, is just wrong. And by the way, to call this a recovery, I think that's wrong too. You know, and this is not a political comment. You can hear it that way if you want, but it doesn't matter who's in the White House, Republican, Independent, Democrat. But President Biden's going to come out today at some point, probably, or one of his advisors, and retail sales were reported today. They were supposed to go down. They actually went up. And they're going to say, see how strong our recovery is. They're going to take credit for the recovery. When in reality, there's two things causing this today. Number one, we opened up. Number two, we borrowed from our children to spend today. And so this isn't a normal recovery. Normal, like economies grow organically. That's the way we create wealth. You can't just borrow from the future on your credit card, spend it today, and go, look how rich I am, right? Because you have to pay it back. And so to call this a normal recovery, in my opinion, is a head fake. It's not true. All right, we did not have a normal recession. We are not having a normal recovery. And what's interesting is you can see it in the data. Today, the retail sales numbers, which by the way, I couldn't update this chart in time for this morning, but retail sales are up 15% today, 15% from where they were in February 2020. That's pre-pandemic. All right, so I'm not comparing it to where we were after we locked down. I'm going back to the before, in normal times, here's normal times. We would be up about 5%. So right now, the economy is growing 3 times faster over the last 16 months than it normally would have. How is that possible? Because you know what? Today, there are 5 million fewer people working than were working in February of 2020. 5 million fewer people working, and yet we're spending 15% more. The only way to do that is use this credit card. All right, now, I'm going to stop here because we're going to talk about the future after this. But I want to lay to put the end to this part of my conversation by saying, look, this year is going to be one of the fastest growing years in U.S. economic history. I think we will continue to grow next year. And there are 3 reasons for that. All right, 3 reasons. Number one, we printed a lot of money. We'll get to that. Number 2, we borrowed a lot of money. And then number 3, my belief is that COVID is almost exhausted. Here is the United States based on 3 statuses, if you will. The dark blue at the bottom, these are people that had COVID. They tested positive. All right. The CDC tells us that for every person that tested positive, there are 4 other people that also had COVID that never got tested. All right. So that number, by the way, is over 120 million Americans that have natural immunity. Now, you can decide whether you believe in the vaccine or not. I'm not trying to make a point about that, but here's the vaccinated people. All right. Now, the reason this thing goes almost to 120% is that some people that have had COVID have now been vaccinated. So we have they have double immunity, if you will, if that's what you think the vaccine does. But we are now at a place where over 80% of Americans, at least 80% directly, and I know this number says 120, have some sort of immunity, natural or vaccine immunity to COVID. That means it's over. And by the way, if it's not over and we shut down again, get ready. Because I think we have already damaged this country deeply. I will go to my grave believing that the shutdown of this economy was the dumbest economic policy, the dumbest sociological policy, the dumbest political policy that we could have ever done. Will have no idea how much damage we have done to the economy, to individuals, to health, to our budget. We won't know that for years, but we have done massive amounts of damage. Nonetheless, we're opening up. All you got to do is turn on the TV on Saturday, Sunday. There's packed football stadiums. No one's wearing a mask. Are those people stupid? Some people think so, but I'm going to tell you, Americans want out. A vast majority of them want out, and we can't stop the fact that economic activity is going to go back. Now, here's my worry, is that we do shut down again. But when I look around and read the news, we're not shutting down. I mean, LA County put a vaccine mandate in if you want to go to a restaurant. So did New York City, but they didn't shut down. All right. If you go to Oregon, you have to wear a mask outside alone walking your dog. All right. They didn't shut down. And so I don't believe we will shut down again. So that's going to happen. On top of that, all the money that the Fed has printed is going to flood into the system. And then finally, all the money that the federal government is spending. All right. So that's it. The next 12 months, if you want to call it that, I don't know, foreseeable future, however you want to think about it, I think we're going to boom. Now, here's the deal. I want to talk about two things and then get into what the government has done. One of my favorite essays, economic essays, is written by Leonard Read. And Leonard Read, it's about 2,000 words. You can find it on the internet. He wrote it, I believe, in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere back there. It's called capital I, comma, pencil. I pencil. The first sentence of this essay is, no one knows how to make me. Now think about that. I mean, you all know what yellow number 2 pencil looks like, right? You go, oh, it's wood, it's paint, it's that little metal thing on the end that holds the eraser on. It's a pencil. But if you think about it, you can't make one. By the way, nobody that works at the plant that packages up the yellow pencils can make one either. You know why? You need lumberjacks. You need somebody to make the paint. You need somebody to make the little metal ring. You have to get somebody to get rubber to make the eraser. And then it all gets put together at a plant with machines that people invented a long time ago. But the bottom line is no one person can make a pencil. No one person. If you just think about the lumberjack out in Oregon or Washington State, getting the cedar wood for the pencil. I mean, they have to sleep, right? So where do they get their bed? They have to have linens to sleep on. They have to have clothes to wear. They have to have food to eat. They have to have a chainsaw, and they have to have a sharpener for the chain. It takes 1 million people to take down a tree. I mean, I get it. You can take an axe out, but what I mean is an operation where you can make millions of pencils. And so the bottom line is that when you think about how many people it takes to make a pencil, it's tens of millions of people. Now, by the way, when they make the yellow paint, they use it for the school bus too. So there's multiple uses for the yellow paint because nobody would make yellow paint just for a pencil. You have to be able to sell it to a lot more people. But the whole point I'm getting to is that even a pencil takes millions of people. And this is where I'm going to about shutdowns. What if you shut down the yellow paint factory? What if you shut down the rubber tree plantation? You can't make pencils. And if you wonder why there are shortages of things today, this is why. And when you turn an economy off like a light switch, you wreck it. It has been built up over centuries, really, to make a pencil for 8 cents. And if you turn everything off, guess what? Pencils now cost 14 cents because we can't make as many of them. And we've now wrecked the interconnectedness of this magnificently amazing blessing we have of a market-based economy. The only way to distribute resources is through the market. You can just, I don't mean that in what I'm talking about is the most efficient way to distribute resources is through the market. The minute the government comes in and shuts it down or redirects resources, it messes up the balance that we had before. And we are going to pay a big price for this in the years ahead. All right. And so let me get to what we have done these days. All right, here is federal government spending, US federal government spending as a percent of GDP. And what I did is I took defense out of this. All right, so actually go back to 1930. This is at the beginning of the Great Depression. Government spending was 2.5% of GDP. All right, it ended the Great Depression at 10, but we started at 2.5. Today, we are 27% of GDP. All right, now this chart only goes back to 1960, but if you look at this, this green is government spending, and I indexed everything. All right, it's a 1. It starts in 1960 at 1. This is government spending. The orange line is GDP, and the blue line is corporate profits. Which part of our economy shows the most greed? I'm serious. All we hear is corporations, all they want to do is make profits. I'm going to tell you, all government wants to do is spend your money. They are the fastest growing entity in the US economy. They have grown 10 times faster than GDP since 1930. Do we have more problems or less? Well, if I turn on the TV, it seems like we have more problems. So tell me again, the government solves problems because they've increased their spending 10 times faster than the rest of us have earned money, and yet our problems multiply. So something must be wrong there. All right, but let's go back because all of this matters for the economy. Now, why did I take out defense? I'm not trying to hide anything. What I'm trying to do is get to underlying spending that we use to help people and build bridges and all of those things, right? Because wars and defense, I mean, it's a necessary evil, right? And the other reason is because if you put World War II in there, it's this massive increase in government spending that makes all these charts look really weird. So that's why a lot of people will start charts of government in 1950 just to keep that big hump out of there. If you understand statistics and charts, you understand that. But so then the question is, people have today is, okay, is Joe Biden or is Nancy Pelosi or the Democrats, are they repeating Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Great Society? Or are they repeating FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the New Deal? And I would argue, and this is the New Deal, this is the Great Society, and I would argue those aren't the right answers yet. Those aren't the right comparisons. Right now, I do believe the correct comparison to what we are doing today is World War II. In World War II, we ended up with government debt over 100% of GDP. Today, we have government debt over 100% of GDP. There's only the last 2 times in the last century that this has happened. All right. And so how do we pay it back? Well, in World War II, by the way, it took us all the way to the late 1990s, and this was Bill Clinton, till we finally paid our debt down. We got into a surplus situation. Now we're back to 100% of GDP in terms of debt. So I believe this is the right comparison. Why? Because what did we do in World War II? I mean, Winston Churchill stood right here. Yes, we fought for our freedom. But what we really did is we built bullets, bombs from an economic perspective, bullets, bombs, planes, tanks. We built stuff to blow it up. All right, we wish we didn't have to do that. We didn't ask for the war. All right, but at the end of it, we had won, great. But we had 100% of our GDP, actually close to 200% in terms of debt. All right, and we had to pay that back. Well, today, what did we do? All right, if you think about it, actually, I own property in Colorado, and it's right on the Colorado River. And I have a little spot on my property that's like 70 feet over the river. I'm looking down one afternoon and just, I'm admiring the view, the Colorado mountains. And I don't know why I didn't focus on it at first, but I'm looking at the Colorado River, and there's a lot of people that use the river, but it is jam-packed. It's like a traffic jam in Chicago on Friday afternoon. All right, there are boats everywhere. There are always fisher men and women. There are always rafters and whitewater rafters, but this is packed. And it's last June, July, August, because I couldn't travel for work, so I was doing Zoom meetings and conference calls from out there. And it's the middle of the summer, and I'm like, what is going on? There's always a lot more boaters in the summer, but this is unbelievable. And my friends out there, they go, they're stimmy boats. And I go, stimmy boats? I mean, I know drift boats, that's what you fish from. Udisco makes rafts, Brunswick makes rafts. Stimmy boats, never heard of. They're like stimulus payments. And I'm like, oh. And so if you think about it, Colorado, here, I'm out kind of close, halfway between Beaver Creek and Steamboat Springs. So it's the ski area. All right, this river, all these areas on the river, there's 20s and 30-year-olds out there all over the place because they all work in restaurants, bars, the mountains. They love to ski. They want to live in the mountains for a while. You know, there's all kinds of reasons, but they're all young and they all work in the service area. And so guess what? None of them were working and they were all getting stimulus checks. And by the way, there are things legal in Colorado that aren't legal everywhere else. And so what they were doing, you know, if you think about this, and this is sad to me, and I love being in the place to say this right now where Winston Churchill once spoke, because we spent all that money back here in World War II, and we sent mostly young men to die for freedom. You know what we're doing today? We're paying people not to work and party, both of which are a total waste of a human life. To die, I mean, you have to win your freedom, so I guess that's not a complete waste, but to party, which is what we did. And if you want to tell me something different, that ain't true, because I saw it on the Colorado River. Nobody cared. They just took their check, bought a boat, and partied. And that's one of the other reasons why I don't think what we did to this economy was good. But here's the point. We finally paid this back because we became massively good at manufacturing during the war. Plus, everybody else was bombed. So we were able to grow our way out of the debt. The US economy boomed after World War II. So the question is, what happens here? If so far all this spending is temporary, we handed it to people to party, we gave out PPP loans, we gave it to hospitals, we gave it to education, we gave it to states, localities, we gave it to a lot of people, but it's a one and done thing. So government spending should come back down. Now the Democrats are talking, and we'll get to this in a minute, about another $3.5 trillion, another trillion on top of the 5. I get all of that. But so far, everything that we've done is temporary. So it's in that way, it looks like World War II. But what about how do we grow out of this? Well, one of the things that happened during COVID is that we learned how to use technology way better. These tech companies had 10 years of growth in 15 months. You know, you think about how we use Zoom, or the S&P 500, which is the 500 kind of biggest stocks in America, not completely, but 5 companies make up 22% of it. All right, it's Microsoft, it's Google, it's Amazon. It's because of tech got us through COVID, just like manufacturing helped us win World War II. So when we look into the future, do we have growth? Yeah. I mean, one of my favorites is Elon Musk's Starlink. I mean, I don't know if you followed this, but he wants to put up almost 40,000 satellites around the world, low orbit, and you're going to be able, with a little dish, to connect to a 5G fast Wi-Fi network. And I don't know how many of you are from rural areas of this country, but I have HughesNet out in Colorado. I can't wait for Starlink because it is so slow. It is so cumbersome. It is so awful. And Starlink's going to be today's generation Wi-Fi satellite system. And by the way, the Apple iPhone that came out this week, the new one, it has a special feature that is a satellite SOS, satellite. So they've made a deal with Globalstar so that if you're in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal, you're going to be able to talk to the emergency responders, or not talk, but at least text them, tell them you're in trouble. Well, this is the first step. This is the way technology always works. The disruption of the world, the first step is always just simple. Doesn't seem like a big deal. But my belief is that eventually they're going to make a deal with Starlink, and when you carry your Apple iPhone, it is going to be a satellite phone anywhere in the world, anywhere. And the cell phone changed the world. Wait till you see what that does. All right, it is huge, allowing anyone to connect at high speeds anywhere. All right, mRNA technology. You heard from the pharmaceutical industry yesterday. It doesn't matter what you believe about the COVID thing. It is changing research with cancer. All right, blockchain, which is the distributed ledger that we trade Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies on. Blockchain is going to change the way we transfer information and store information on the internet. The cloud is still in its infancy, right? These things are huge, and they're gonna provide a lot of growth. And so if you want to know, the only way we can get out of this, the debt we have done, is we have to grow out of it. We have to earn and then pay back those resources. Now, what's interesting about this is that I want to kind of share with you how I think of the world. So let's go to 1935. Government was 10% of the economy. All right. Now, this isn't perfect. And if you wanted to, debate me on it, you could, because it doesn't mean there are 10 people in the wagon. All right. But government, but 90 people basically have to pay for that 10. All right. That 10% of the economy. And then if you go to the end of the Great Society, we had 17 people in the wagon, and now 83 are pulling. Which one of those wagons goes faster? I mean, remember, government doesn't pay for itself. The private sector has to pay for government. It's the only way the government can get resources, tax or borrow from the private sector. And then today, if you look at it, we have 27 people in the wagon, and we have 73 people pulling. So once again, which one of those wagons goes faster? And I would, by the way, of these 73 people, 13 work for the government. So by the way, they should probably be in the wagon too. Right? But if you think about this, there's two ways that we end up forecasting using this model. Number one, how many people are in the wagon? All right, now if this goes down to 20, then we end up with 20. All right, and 80 people pulling. So it's not as bad as 27 and 73. The other question is, how strong are these 80? And I would argue with the technology we have today, they're strong. All right. And I don't mean like people haven't changed. Well, they have. I mean, you look at NFL football players today versus 30 years ago, they've changed. All right. But 80 people today with the technology you have. 150 years ago, you had to use a shovel to dig a ditch. Now you use a backhoe. That's my point. And so these people are stronger, and we have more people in the wagon. But I would argue the only reason we can keep going forward is because we keep getting stronger in terms of growth, in terms of technology. Because the minute becomes, if it ever became 100 in the wagon and nobody pulling, we're done. And at some point, you put more and more and more and more and more people in the wagon, you can't go anywhere. So the last 15 years, the US economy has grown about 2% a year. That's it, real GDP. After World War II, it was 4 or 5% a year. So we've slowed down, and I believe it's because we put more people in the wagon. So the only question I have about the future is how much more are we going to spend, and how fast is that spending going to go back to 20%? If it does, if we pass $3.5 trillion infrastructure deal, another trillion, I guess it's hard and soft infrastructure, the government spending is permanently up to about 25% of GDP. And all bets are off the table about how fast we grow. The last thing I want to talk about, I actually want to talk about two more quick things, is this. We are going to have inflation. And it's really, really simple. We printed too much money. And when the Federal Reserve, I knew Milton Friedman when he was live. I met him a number of times. What the heck just happened there? I met him a number of times, and what he told me to do is watch M2. All right, M2 is the money supply. And when you look at what we have done with the deposits in the banking system, they have grown faster than ever in history. Like I told you, what we have done is unprecedented. The Federal Reserve did quantitative easing. They paid banks to lend. They gave money directly to people to deposit in their banks. And as a result, the banking system has exploded in size. In fact, today, we have 33% more money in the economy than we had in February 2020. 33% more money. Now, what does that mean? And I'm going to tell you the exact way that I really truly learned about monetary policy. And it's a simple way to think about it. All right. Let's say we have an economy where there are $10. And in that economy, there are also 10 apples. So how much does each apple cost? Well, it's $1. $10, 10 apples. Now, what if we increase the money supply to $13? We've gone from 10, that's a 33% increase, increase in the money supply. So now we have $13, but only 10 apples. Now, how much does each apple cost? Guess what? $1.30. We just had 30% inflation because we increased the money supply by 30% and the output of apples didn't move. Now, if the output of apples went up to 13, then we would have every apple cost $1. But by the way, if the output of apples went up to 13 and we would have only had $10, then apples would have fallen to 79 cents or whatever, you do the math. So really, when you increase the number of apples, they should fall. You should be able to buy more of them. But when you print more money, you can't. So you offset the benefits of productivity. With me on that? All right, so now let's go back. We have $13 and we had 10 apples. But because of the COVID pandemic and the shutdowns, we kept people from going into the apple orchard. And so now we only have 5 apples. We had $10, now we have 13. We went from 10 apples down to 5. $13 and 5 apples. How much does each apple cost? $2.60. Want to know why gasoline is over $4 a gallon? Because we've increased the amount of money and we've slammed the amount of production. All right. And so if you come back to apples for a second, we're now up to $2.60. Now here you go. The Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell's the chairman of the Fed. He says inflation is transitory. Now, by the way, I told you I'm a stickler for words. What does transitory mean? Everybody thinks it means temporary. That's what the Fed kind of makes it sound like. But actually, the root of transitory is transit. And transit means to go from one place to the next. So transitory actually means, in my view, going from lower inflation to higher inflation. Transient means temporary. All right. And so they use the word transitory. I think it's kind of on purpose because they actually want inflation higher. Right? And I'll come to what inflation does in just a second. But let's go back to this because guess what? You think the Fed might raise rates soon or they're going to change their position? They're not. They want inflation to go higher. Plus, here's about what's to happen. Here's about what is going to happen. This is what is about to happen. That's what I wanted to say. And that is we're going to let people back in the orchard. So guess what? We have $13 and 5 apples, and we're going to get 10 more apples. Eventually we're going to fix supply chains. iPencil, all the millions of people, we're going to finally figure out how to work it all again, and we're going to get back to 10 apples. And people are going to go, well, now the apple fell from $2.60 back to $1.30. See, Jerome Powell was right. Inflation was transient. But here's the problem, is that, yeah, apples come from $2.60 back down to $1.30, but they're still $1.30. They used to be $1. And so what we have done is eroded the value of our money. And when you erode the value of money, you erode living standards in the US. You make it harder to plan for the future. Inflation, and this is the problem with a lot of we haven't had inflation since the 70s, early 80s. People haven't seen it. All right. But the bottom line is where it comes from is printing too much money. Inflation is the value of goods in money terms. And if you print more money, money will become worth less. Not worthless, worth less. So let me finish up by just telling you that, and I won't even show you this model, but I still believe today, believe it or not, that the stock market is undervalued. However, and there's two components of the market. There's profits and there's interest rates. And profits are at all-time record highs. And why is that? Well, I think number one, we're using technology. Number two, we've printed money and borrowed money like never before. So retail sales are up 15%. If you're a company that sells retail goods, you've just had the best year of profitability ever. Well, what happens next year? Because we're done. We're not going to pay unemployment benefits past September. All right, we're done. All this government infusion of cash into the economy is going to slow down. And that means profits are at risk, because I think a lot of these profits are artificial. You know, here's the way I think about the money supply and all this government borrowing. If you're in a car accident, what do they give you? Like right away, morphine or whatever, some kind of opioid, some kind of painkiller. And some of this stuff is so strong, you know, you forgot you were even in a car accident. I mean, your leg is shattered in 5 places and you can feel no pain. You'll get up and walk and you'll ruin it even more. All right. And that's what we've done to the economy. We shut down this economy. We turned off the supply chains. We have hurt it dramatically. And all we did was give morphine. And that morphine is going to wear off. And so while I still think that the market is undervalued today, it's because if you look at current profits and then you discount them by current interest rates, which are really low, the market's worth more than it's trading at today. However, if profits fall and interest rates go up because of inflation, that can change in an instant. So what I've been warning our clients after 13 years of being pretty bullish, really bullish on the market because it's undervalued, is that we might pay the price here pretty quickly. See, a lot of people don't know, but 1966 to 1980, the stock market went nowhere. It was trading lower in 1980 than it was in 1966. And people don't remember this because anybody around today, all they know is stocks go up. You open a Robinhood account, you buy stuff, it goes up, it goes up, it goes up. It doesn't always go up. And I've warned people today that that's true. And then finally, let me just quickly talk about where we are with tax rates and government spending. You know, right now the Democrats, they've worked with Republicans to get $1 trillion infrastructure bill. And now they want, the Republicans will not work with them on a $3.5 trillion soft infrastructure bill, which is really about climate change and inequality and healthcare and the things that really aren't infrastructure, but they're calling it that because I guess politically it sounds okay. All right, but here's my problem with this. Just as a financial fiduciary, somebody with kids, we just spent $5 trillion. If I send my son money in college for food and he spends it partying, and then he calls me and says, I need food, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And what's interesting about the US government is we just paid people not to work. And now we say, oh, we need money for infrastructure. And I'm like, wait a minute, you just spent $5 trillion. Now you're telling me, oh, this spending is really needed. Well, you don't get both. You shouldn't, in my opinion, because it's not fiduciarily responsible to run this country into debt. Right? And they'll claim, oh, we're going to create jobs and all this stuff. That's not true. It's never worked. We've gone from 2.5% of GDP to 27% of GDP. Government has grown 10 times faster than the economy. And we have more problems today than we ever have. At least that's what they tell me when I turn on the news. All right. And so government is not an answer to all of that. But having said that, the question is, are we going to get any of this? And I'll close up by telling you this. You know, I love alternative sports. I've always watched the Tour de France, and you know, I love watching lacrosse on TV. And I mean, I love baseball, basketball, football, all that. But I've kind of found myself drifting towards sort of alternative sports. You know what one of my favorite lately has been? Tractor pulls. Believe it or not. I love those things. I don't know if you've ever been to one, but they have like 4 engines on these tractors. There's like 28,000 horsepower, and there's all these rules. They only get like 10 gallons of, you know, the hooch to run each engine, and then the sled at the back that they pull. As the further they get down the track, the more the weight goes up, and then that sled starts slamming into the dirt. and it gets harder and harder to build, and the wheels spin, they run out of gas, it's over. All right. And so the winner will be out 518 feet, or the leader. And they'll, you know, you get a big tear off, and I'm watching these things. I'm like, he's going to make it. And then they get to 480 feet, and then all of a sudden that thing starts digging into the dirt, and engine 3 goes out, engine 1 goes out, and they just die out at 508 feet. They don't win. And my belief right now is that that's where these $3.5 trillion and $1 trillion bills are. That's where all these tax hikes are. Joe Manchin has come out and said it's not responsible to spend more money. All right, we have inflation. We have to slow down. And my belief is that this tractor isn't going to make it past the finish line. So my view today is that the spending we've had is temporary, and we are not going to end up with another massive increase, a permanent increase in the size of government. And as a result, I have decent hope about the future, because it would worry me if we did another new deal, another great society on top of shutting down for the pandemic. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the future, and I still believe that the market is undervalued. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. We're going to do any Q&A?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You have some time for questions and answers.
Oh, I do, if you want to, yeah.
So now we have some time for questions and answers. Now there is a microphone. There will be a microphone here. And if you're joining virtually,
Anybody? There we go.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Andrew Lurkins.
Andrew.
I'm in Blue Blazers. So with the increased inflation and most likely the tax rate, can you forecast kind of like almost a 2008 style recession that we had with the housing market, or is that like a more unrealistic scenario?
All right, good question, Andrew. All right, so Andrew, you know, with tax rates coming, inflation here, could we have another 2008 kind of housing correction problem? And I actually wrote a whole book about 2008. So I will resist going all the way with this. But if you go back and look at 03, 04, 05, 06, the price of homes versus the rental value of homes was out of whack with all of history. And we are not there today. The second thing is that we weren't inflationary then. And so what was driving the price of homes, it was the existence of subprime loans. I mean, subprime loans were, I was hearing in 03, 04, 05, 06, like stories coming out of California. And I don't know how many of you have ever, thought about owning a home or watched the process, but people would go look at a home, and let's say it's a $300,000 home. And they could get financing from the bank for 90% of it, which was $270,000. But they really didn't have the other 30. And so what the bank would do is they would say, we're going to give you a mortgage for 270 of the 300, but then we're going to give you a home line of credit at the same time for 30. And so what you were able to do is go buy a house with no money down. And I would hear these stories and I'm like, there is no way that's happening. Banks would never let that happen. Well, it turns out it was absolutely true. And one of the reasons that people would do that is that house prices kept going up and interest rates were really, really, really low. And back then, everybody was doing adjustable rate mortgages. So when the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, so now you had 100% value of your home loaned. And what happened is, and interest rates were all adjustable. So when the Fed raised rates from 1% to 3%, you couldn't afford that home anymore. Today, everybody's getting long-term mortgages. So you can get a 30-year mortgage. First of all, we don't have 100% loans happening. I'm sure it's one-offs somewhere, but we don't have that happening. But we also don't have people getting all these adjustable rate loans. That's not why house prices are up. House prices are up for really a couple of reasons. One, people want to get out of the city, out of Chicago, either to the suburbs or to Florida, all right? And they want to do it because there's unrest in the streets and tax rates are high in the Northeast, in Chicago, and San Francisco. And so people are moving to places with lower tax rates. Number two, interest rates are really low. Number three, house prices are up because we're printing all this money. We have $13 in the same number of houses. And then finally, there's a shortage of houses. There has been all the way since 08. We need 1.5 million houses a year just to keep up with population. And we haven't done that since 2007. And so I think houses are permanently higher in price, especially in lower tax, more suburban areas of the country for all those reasons. So thanks for the question.
Brian Donlofy. I have a question. How do you think about your wagon analogy with the baby boomers moving into the retirement years, Social Security, Medicare, and so on, how your wagon potentially gets bigger there?
Yep.
With then a lower birth rate and then the demographics that are coming along to grow us out of to the debt issues that we're at. How do you think about that as an economist?
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, that's a great way to put it. As we age, I mean, the trustees of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the government trustees just came out and said we're in real trouble with all of these entitlement programs and their trust funds. But yeah, because we've set up Social Security the way it is, we're going to keep putting more and more people in the wagon. And I fully get that it's not like putting a full person in the wagon. I mean, I don't know if you remember, one of the problems I have with the wagon pulling analogy is Republicans, especially conservatives, I'm a libertarian, they get all angry when it comes to politics because they think, oh, anybody that's getting a government check isn't going to vote for me. And Mitt Romney at one time in a party, and they surreptitiously taped him. He goes, well, I'm starting out with 43% of the country won't vote for me because they're all getting money from the government. And that leaked. And I fully understand his frustration and the political process of the government kind of giving people money and therefore counting on people to support that. But that's not the way he should have talked about this, because it's only parts of people. It's not, some people count fully on the government, but not all, so Social Security is part of somebody's retirement. But the more and more people that get older, and we are certainly at that stage right now where baby boomers are leaving the workforce, they're not pulling the wagon anymore, and they're getting in the wagon, and that's going to slow the wagon down. It's happened in Japan. It's happening in Europe. Most European countries have flat to down birth rates. And so these are all issues. And plus they have Social Security and retirement entitlements. And so these are problems. I mean, how you deal with this is a real issue. And it's going to get harder and harder and harder to pull the wagon as that happens. Because tax rates have to go up, then people are less willing to work. The wagon grows more slowly, revenues grow more slowly, and you just dig a deeper and deeper hole. Sorry, that sounds really pathetic and terrible, but anyway. Hello, sir.
Hi, I'm John Langton. I'm a recently retired professor of political science here. I'm a progressive. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, sir. And without getting into a big debate here, my problem with your presentation is that you have completely sidestepped the whole pressing question of climate change, what we're going to do about it, And on the other hand, the growing and acute inequality in the country. I'd like to see what you have to say about climate change, how we're going to react to that, how we should react to it, and what we should do about the growing inequality in the country, economic, social, political, as it were. I'd just like to hear your views.
Sure. So let me just start with inequality real briefly. So inequality, they use what's called the Gini ratio, and we compare the income of the highest 10% earners versus the lowest 10, or the highest quintile versus the lowest quintile. There's all kinds of ways to find that ratio, and there is no doubt that over time that has increased. All right, let me give you a nuts and bolts answer first. If we go in and adjust incomes, because we all know that, well, I hope you know, the top 10% of income earners pay 70% of all the taxes. So if anyone thinks we don't try to address inequality, I don't know what to say, because the bottom 10% of earners on an income tax basis actually get tax credits. We give them money, whereas and it's the top 10% that's giving them. And we've tried and tried and tried. We have spent tens and tens of trillions of dollars trying to address inequality, and it doesn't go away. The Bible says the poor will always be with us. I guess the Bible's right, because we've spent tens and tens of trillions and we can't stop it. All right. And so that's number one. If you take away the taxes that people pay and you add the benefits that people earn, turns out inequality hasn't moved very much at all. But more importantly than that, let me just address this from, it's kind of one of my favorite parables about the economy. I hoped I was going to get a chance to share it with you today. So let's say we live on an island, and there are 10 people on the island. And every day we wake up and we go catch 2 fish. You got a spear, you do whatever you do. All right, catch them with your hands because you're so fast. But everybody catches 2 fish, and you eat them, and then you go to bed. And you have to have 2 fish to live. That's enough protein, enough food for you to live every day. But every day you wake up. This is subsistence living. All right. Now, all these stories I'm telling are really simple. I got it, but they have an underlying theme to them. And so you catch 2 fish, you go to bed, and that's it. That's life. By the way, there's no savings. If you get sick, and your neighbor gives you a fish, they're going to starve too. So I mean, this is not a good world to live in, and we did live in it. How we got here, I still don't know. But that's the world. All right. Then 2 people figure out how to make a boat and a net. And they come up with this idea and say, if we go 500 yards offshore, throw this net in, I bet there's more fish out there. And guess what? They do it. So 2 out of the 10 go 500 yards offshore. They cast the net in the water. They pull out 20 fish. So 10 people, 2 fish a day is 20. Now it's 2 people, 20 fish. They have now replaced the entire effort of 10 people. All right. And so 2 people can now catch 20 fish. You have the other 8. What do? Well, there's 2 future worlds. One, they go, wow, this is great. I hated fishing. I want to be a farmer. I'm going to grow some corn. Another one says, I like climbing trees and picking coconuts. And I hate fishing. Another one says, I'm going to clean the fish and cook them. I'm going to be the chef. Another one says, I'm a mechanic. I'm going to fix the boat and the net when it breaks down so that they can keep going out and catching 20 fish a day. And so at the end of that day, you have mechanics and chefs and fruit pickers and farmers and fishermen and women. All right, we have so many jobs on that island that we have to invent the Department of Labor to keep it up with it. All right, and that's how wealth is created. All right, but then let's go back to inequality. The other way this island could go is there are 8 people on the beach, and by the way, one of them is Bernie Sanders. All right. And Bernie starts giving speeches to these other 8 people. And he starts saying, this is unfair. We can only catch 2 fish a day, Those two with the boat, they catch 10 fish each every day. They're rich, we're poor. They make 5 times more money than we do. They catch 10 fish, we can only catch 2. This isn't right. It's inequality. So when the boat comes in, Bernie marches over, he and his 8 people in his army, and they take 16 fish. All right, because we want to give 2 fish from these rich people to all these others. So then guess what happens? Right? Everybody gets 2 fish, just like before, but no one benefited from the boat. And slowly but surely, these people that invented the boat, they're not going to fix it. The net's going to tear, the boat's going to sink, and they're going to go back to using a spear to catch 2 fish. And so because we tried to redistribute wealth, because we tried to make the world a more equal place, we actually wrecked the productivity and the growth that we had. So the more people we put in the wagon, the more fish we steal, the more wealth you take from somebody that creates wealth. You know, and this is the problem. Like, people somehow think that you can't create. Well, Sam Walton, he's not far from here. I mean, a lot of his family lives within 50 miles of this place. And he had a little 1,000-foot store. Read his story. Little 1,000-foot 5 and dime. He didn't come from money. He didn't go to Yale. His parents didn't stake him. And he became worth billions. Made it out of nothing. He's the fisherman. He's the 2 people that invented the boat. That's the way. Everybody has equal opportunity, I believe, at this point in our lives. I mean, it might not have been true the whole time of this history of this country, but anyone can start a 5 and dime. You have to come up with a good idea. Nobody's going to stop you. Elon Musk can put up satellites everywhere. All right. So the bottom line is that's what inequality comes, in my opinion, from creation, productivity growth. You know, the reason Bill Gates is worth more than all of us combined is he made all of us wealthier. So guess what? He gets $10 from every person on the face of the earth. And he improved my life by $1,000. So that's a deal. All right. But he's rich. I'm richer, way richer than I am. And so that's, you know, unfortunately, some people get rich, some don't. But it's not a function of evil. It's a function of the market. And trying to fix it actually makes it worse. Because when you slow down growth, when everybody only catches 2 fish, that's not as good a world as when you sit down with cornbread and coconuts and you don't have to cook your food and you don't have to fix the boat, because that's the system that grows when you create it. Climate change, I don't even want to go into, because you don't want to hear what I have to say. I think maybe the world's warming, not as much as the models have predicted. I think the models have been way, way off. And this idea that we have to change all of mankind to fix it, I don't buy it. And one of my worries today, and I almost hate doing this, but Klaus Schwab, I don't know if any of you know the name. He is the head of the World Economic Forum. And that's the group that has Davos every year. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Davos is a ski resort in Switzerland. And the richest people in the world and the most powerful people in the world go to Davos every year. And by the way, in order to kind of go there, you got to be pretty arrogant. You got to think you're the elite of the elite of the elite. All right, this is the richest people in the world and the most powerful. And Klaus Schwab founded this thing, and he just wrote a book last June called COVID-19, The Great Reset. And here's his view of the world in a nutshell. All right, it's a 200-page book. That climate change, and by the way, it's called climate change, not warming change, but nonetheless, climate change creates an environment that allows more viruses to multiply. And that's really where COVID came from. Scientists are certain that COVID came because the climate was changing. No mention of the Wuhan lab, but nonetheless, it happened because of the climate. And then COVID because it affected lower income people more than higher income people, actually caused more inequality. And then inequality, because of its inefficiency, causes more climate change. And then climate change causes more viruses. And so therefore, we need government to reset the whole world. Joe Biden called it Build Back Better. Other people call it reimagine the world. All right. And what's amazing about this is I'm looking at government from 2.5% of GDP to 27. We've already reimagined the world. Government's grown 10 times faster than the S&P 500, than GDP in the last 70 years. That's reimagining. The government's 27% of GDP today. It used to be 2.5. And supposedly now we need a great reset. Well, I would reset. I'd reset back to 1965 and go back to when government spending was 10% of GDP. And I think we'd get a lot better outcomes. But that's where Build Back Better, reimagine, all of these things come from, is Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset. This is not a conspiracy theory. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. It's in print. Go pick it up, read it. All right? This is exactly what he says. And I here's the deal. Climate change may be real, but I'm not willing to pay that price. I'm not willing to put people in poverty to get away from it. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. It is simple. You know, by the way, it is simplistic. That fisherman's argument is simplistic. But I've not found any better way to explain where wealth comes from, why redistribution reverses it.
My name's Ben Parks. You briefly mentioned it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on Robinhood more, and so many people getting introduced to the market in that way, and sort of driving these certain stocks to be so separated from their fundamentals. And do you think that's going to have bigger repercussions when that bubble eventually pops?
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is good. And thank you. And by the way, I didn't mean to, I hope you're on Robinhood. I hope you're trading. I hope you're learning. It's valuable, hugely valuable as you live your life for all kinds of things, buying a house or investing in a graduate degree or getting insurance, anything. All right. And so that's a really good question. I want you to be on Robinhood. Go ahead, buy AMC, buy GameStop. And learn. All right, because but yes, they have become hugely divergent from fundamental values. What really creates the value of a company is how much money they earn, and we usually do it right, the price of a share versus the earnings per share, and then you compare it to all kinds of other things. So by the way, you could buy a laundromat. And you spend $75,000 on a laundromat, and it returns you $7,500 a year in profit. That's 10%, or a PE of 10 to 1. The price was $75,000. You earned $7,500, and so you can use it for anything. And so if you're on Robinhood, if you're thinking like that, there's all kinds of advice that I could give you about what to buy or what not to buy, but I would not be buying what they're telling me to buy on social media. I would do my own research, or find a researcher that you trust. And it's not the one that just happens to have 10 million followers. Like, that may be for real. It may be just for hype. But don't forget, on the other side of GameStop and AMC, hedge funds lost $9 billion. Those are supposed to be the smartest people in the room. And then, and a lot of people say, well, that's the democracy of investing, and it is. But I would just be careful of all the hyped names. One of the early ways I learned one of the early things I learned about investing is buy companies you know. One of my best trades ever was when my wife came to me and said, "Have you seen these UGG boots?" Like this was 15 years ago. I'm like, UGG? Like what the heck? I never heard of them at all. She goes, a lady came up to me in the store and I had mine on and I didn't even know she owned them, but the lady told me she had 3 pairs. She's like, they're hot. And I went and bought the company that it's called Decker. And I bought it at like $8 a shirt. I sold it at 180. It was like, and I had no idea. It wasn't because I was a great trader or anything. It's just that I listened to the market. And so, you know, if you like Ford cars, if you like Nike shoes, if you like, you know, there's a million ways to invest. But I would just argue, be really careful about social media. And Bitcoin, there is no way the government's going to let that become money. There is no way. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. They could possibly, I know we lost a bunch and all that, but 21 million, which means you can't print any more money. If Bitcoins are money, the Fed can't increase the money supply. And last year, what they did is they increased it by 33%. So are they going to let a currency exist that you can't increase? No, they'll never do it. They won't let you pay your taxes in it, and therefore it will never be a money. So all this talk about how Bitcoin's going to replace the dollar, I don't believe that either. Now, watch, I'll be wrong, but I just don't think the government will let it be because you can't manipulate it. And it's like the gold standard. You know, the reason we aren't on the gold standard is because it was hard money. It was hard money. We find 2 or 3% more gold every year, but that's it. But with dollars, we just increased them by 33%. And the government likes that. They like to be able to play around with the money supply because they can make everybody feel good during a pandemic. And eventually we'll pay a price with inflation. And with Bitcoin, they could not have done that. They couldn't have spent $5 trillion last year. And so that's why they'll never let it be a money.
So I think we have time only for one question. So you can come up.
Yeah. There we go. So I kind of want to pick your brain on I think it was Dr. Langton's question. On your, I would say I'm probably fall somewhere between the two of you. I kind of agree with your I guess the story with the fishes. That's a good analogy. Something that the one flaw I find in that, though, I want to know how you would respond to this, is it makes the assumption, it requires the assumption that everyone started out from the same place. Right. Now, I come from St. Louis County, and that's a pretty stratified area. I come from the south side. That's where most of the wealth in the county is concentrated. And I guess my question to you would be, what should we do about, I guess I'll use the analogy, the people on the north, because even if you wanted to start a business there, it's really hard to get the funds to do so. And even if you did, you would probably have to take out a loan. You wouldn't be able to pay it back because you can't make your prices high enough to where you can sustain that. Right. And as a result, I mean, I was learning yesterday, there's places there where there's no grocery stores, right, even within reasonable distance. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, and this is a great point, and I'm just going to, if I rephrase it badly, come back and correct me. But this point is that, hey, on the island, everybody's equal in my parable, and it's all equal, but we don't live in a world where people are all equal. All right, I 1,000% agree. There are some neighborhoods, I'm from the Chicago area, South Side, West Side. Your opportunities, it's a miracle when people get out of there, and get an education or open a business and are successful like that. We're talking 5th, 6th generation of impoverished like families, and that's unbelievably sad. And so I'm actually going to go back, and I apologize. I don't know if you're ready to get out of here and tired of this, but I'm going to go deep on this, and we'll close up right here. If we go back far enough in mankind, all right, and womankind, all right, people kind, and and we think about how it's what Ludwig von Mises called having, and he's a German, and we would call ownership. So how did we get stuff, like own it? And there were two ways. We were the first ones there. Said, this is my forest. I'm going to build my cabin out of these trees. Okay. And therefore you had it. You owned it. All right. You were the first one there. You claimed ownership. Or the second way is you stole it from whoever got there first. All right. So you could go back in America and talk about American Indians and so I got to tell you, life isn't fair. That's not my answer to your question, but it wasn't fair. All right. And so as a people, what do we do? And so one of the things is that we know happened is that, well, I believe happened. Moses walked down the mountain with stone tablets. And one of his tablets said, thou shalt not steal. All right. So what started happening is that there was this ownership, and it was really by violence, with swords, with dukes and earls and feudal society, and we just steal stuff back and forth, and the Romans would fight the Goths, and it's just like it went on for centuries, for millennium, and then slowly, but we had the Magna Carta, and then I believe the UK Constitution, and then the US Constitution, and other. It was mostly Western civilization, but we kind of said, okay, this is the ownership that exists today. We're now going to kind of set it into law. All right. Now this raises a whole bunch of questions. Was it fair? Was it fair? Did Rockefeller have too much when that was set into law? I'm making this stuff up, but I mean history. But you get my point. I'm just trying to make a point about it. And so that when you have this distribution of wealth and land and income, and then you create the laws that respect private property, that give people contracts, that don't allow you to steal from me, and you make it illegal, all those things, then you've kind of set society. All right. Now, we all know that whatever was set, somebody could argue wasn't fair. And I look at the history of America, and women weren't allowed to vote, and property, blacks weren't allowed to vote, or they were slaves. No doubt, all of those things happened. And as a result, I would argue that there's some, like if you go back historically, there's some unfairness that we could look to by race, by gender, that was kind of set in law. But then the second question comes, how do you fix that? And here's the problem. The only way to fix it is with violence. And what the law is supposed to be about is peace. But if we violently go and take stuff from one group and give it to another, the government is now doing exactly what we did before we got the law. So that's a problem. All right. I hope you understand that is a problem with trying to fix all of it. But the second thing is, if we have law and now everyone is equal in the eyes of the law, then from this point on, everybody has equal opportunity. And that's what the law was. Okay, look, we get it. You had a bigger army than me. You stole that from me. All I want is you never to steal another thing from me, and I'm going to compete against you in the open market. That's fair. All right, I get it. I can't go come back. You got all those soldiers. I can't steal it back. I'm not going to try. I'm going to try and start Walmart, and I'm going to beat you that way. I'm going to control more resources because I'm a better business person. And so what I would argue is that law, and this is kind of the difference between conservatives and liberals, socialists really, but it's, and conservatives kind of want to keep it. They don't want to change it because, and it's not because they won, but it's because when you change, when you use violence to try and fix it, you're wrecking what happens with property rights and the rule of law and all of that. And so the key is today, it's like, okay, how do we make up for the wrongs that we've done? Do we make certain that we make it fair and equal opportunity in the future, or do we try to go back and fix, with the mistakes that somebody made in the past? And I would argue that trying to fix it can kind of wreck it for the future, which is sad. I mean, I get that. I totally get. I don't know the right answer because the law is whatever it locked in place wasn't fair. Because the day before the law locked it in place, some duke stole the serf's wife. I don't know, and then we locked it into law, and that's just not fair. All right, but that's where it was, and then 200 years later, you have to say, boy, that all these laws have given us pretty equal opportunity. And then I've said it before, we've spent tens of trillions of dollars trying to create equality, and it hasn't worked. I mean, we have inner city, like in Chicago, St. Louis, places where there's 4, 5, 6 generations of poverty. And that's after trillions of dollars. So what's the plan? Because that didn't work. In Chicago, we had Caprini Green and we tore it down. I mean, we've tried all kinds of different things. And we built scattered apartments. Then we moved people to suburbs. Then we've tried a million things. And we just keep spending more and more money. And we used to be on the 3rd generation, then the 4th, then the 5th, now the 6th. And it hasn't worked. And so I think we need to we want to build back better, build back different. And don't try to use government to fix all this. But we don't seem to have any other answer. And that, to me, that would be my message, I guess, for today. Stay invested because the market's undervalued. Be careful of what you buy and think about how the world's built. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wesbury, for such an interesting and thought-provoking talk on the topic. Now I invite our dean, Dr. David Roebuck, for closing remarks.
That was a very thoughtful presentation, intelligent presentation. I enjoyed it a great deal. I was thinking while Brian was speaking, I know based on my youthful appearance, it's hard to believe this, but I took college economics almost 50 years ago in my freshman semester. And I've learned more economics from you last night at dinner and this morning, I think, than I did an entire semester. It was a very poorly taught economics class. Thank you for being here. This is very, very good. Remind you that we have some more great presentations coming up at 10:30 and 1, and I hope